Losing a talent like Odell Beckham is obviously hard to absorb, but we've shown you these numbers. Without him on the field, Baker Mayfield completing nearly 80% of his passes with a near perfect QBR when targeting all other receivers. Both of those figures would by far lead the league. So let's start with the easy part. Well, not easy, but let me start with Adam Schefter on this if I can. Schefter, is there any conversation that you're aware of out there for the Browns looking to make some kind of move to replace Odell or bring in some sort of help in advance of the trade deadline on Tuesday?
No, I think, in fact, people forget that they have some good, talented, young wide receivers. Rashard Higgins has been very productive in that offense for Cleveland. Donovan Peoples-Jones caught the game-winning touchdown pass on Sunday. They have a tight end, Harrison Bryant, who was one of the most impressive offensive players that they had during training camp, somebody that they have a lot of belief in. So I don't see the Browns going out and going to acquire some wide receiver. Again, that could always change. If there's a value, a deal to be had, maybe they make it. But I can tell you this, I think they believe in the young players they have on the offensive side of the football. But I also should point out, Greeny, not only is Odell Beckham Jr. out for the year, but Jarvis Landry has been playing through a lot of pain this year. Hip injuries, rib injuries. It's been something that has really slowed him down. So you're without Beckham, you're with a hobbled Landry, and now you're reliant upon these other young receivers who they really believe in right now.
And again, I mean, they've been playing without Nick Chubb for quite some time as well. So a lot of injury concerns there. Meanwhile, let's shift it back to the real conversation here, which is about the absence of Odell Beckham Jr. Dominique, without him on the field, we've talked a lot about how Baker spreads the ball out. He goes through his progressions, all the rest of that. So does it make it, as a defender, harder or easier to prepare for the Browns with no Odell?
I mean, I think it's much easier to prepare for them because you're not thinking about how you're going to stop Odell Beckham, but it's much harder to play against them because you don't have to figure out how to stop Odell Beckham. I think those numbers suggest that maybe they're slightly better passing, or Baker is passing in certain situations without Odell Beckham, but that's a running team, and they're a much better running offense with Odell Beckham, and it's because of the threat that he imposes there on the outside. It's not because he's a hell of a lead blocker, but they're 5.2 yards per carry with Odell, as you see Himbo put the numbers up with Odell on the field versus 3.9 yards per carry with him not on the field. So he impacts that offense. Whether it shows up in Baker's performance or not, I don't know, but I do think it's going to be harder to play against him, yet the week leading up to it might be a little easier in preparation.
Look, everyone has heard the conversation. Lewis, we've had it here and other places. It has been that for whatever reason, Baker Mayfield just seems to play better when Odell is not out there. When you hear that, Louis Riddick, what is your reaction?
My reaction is the same as it was remember when Megatron retired up in Detroit, that people thought that would have a positive effect, that less would equate to more for Matthew Stafford, because now the offense would run organically. The reads would become organic. It would just become natural. The offense would flow the way you put it in the meeting room, because you're not trying to force the ball to one player and trying to make sure that he gets his targets and gets his touches. Maybe that's the case now. Maybe that's something that you will see happen on the football field for Cleveland. It remains to be seen if that's the case, but maybe that's the effect that it has on Baker Mayfield. Now, I mean, going up against Cincinnati, with all due respect, is not the same as going up against Pittsburgh or Baltimore, and we've already seen how that happens for Cleveland, how that turns out for Cleveland. We want to see what this looks like now when they go up against stiffer competition that is really going to judge and really going to give you an indication about where they stand in their division and where they stand in the AFC. And maybe it has a positive effect net, in the end, but that remains to be seen. But I understand why people believe that it may have a positive effect on him going forward.
A really interesting game this weekend, Raiders and Browns, because both of them feel like teams were sort of trying to figure out just how good they are. Damian Woody, how big a deal are you willing to make of Baker's performance last week? 5 touchdowns after Odell goes out, AFC Player of the Week. So much conversation about him. It feels like every week is a referendum on his entire career. Where do you stand on it right this minute?
Well, listen, I think it's a big confidence booster for Baker, because make no mistake about it, got players that say they don't listen to the media, they're lying. That was like the biggest story that we were talking about, everyone was talking about last week was, can Baker step up? Baker's at a crossroad, and then he goes out and has this huge performance, particularly in the second half against the Cincinnati Bengals. So I'm sure from a confidence perspective, it was huge for Baker. But like Lewis said, let's put some perspective on this. It was the Bengals. Okay, it was the Bengals. Let's see moving forward what Baker does without Odell Beckham Jr. against some of the bigger boys in the AFC.
What do you think, Schefter? This is one of those teams that is always a hot button. Every single week it feels like there's some sort of drama. This week it's all signs sort of pointing upwards despite the fact that they lose Odell. Where do you stand on the whole thing right now, Adam Schefter?
I think this team is right where it should be, progressing as it should. I think the quarterback has played well. Yes, they have to prove they can beat Baltimore. Yes, they have to prove they can beat Pittsburgh. Yes, there are steps this team still has to make. But again, the Cleveland Browns are relevant. And after 7 weeks, that in and of itself is a victory. Because there have been enough seasons over the last couple of decades where we've been 7 weeks into the season and we're talking about firing the head coach or who they're going to take at number one or what moves they're going to make or which players they're going to dump. They are in the thick of this. And with the expanded playoff field, this is exactly where Cleveland wants to be with a new coaching staff, with the quarterback growing and improving. I think this is a great spot for the Browns to be in.
That's a very reasonable way to look at this situation. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.